Lobsters being caught and purchased has led to gunshots being fired through a Nova Scotia buyer's home who is rumored to be involved with purchasing these lobsters. Lobsterboys has been adamant about this out of season fishing being a huge problem for the future of this fishery. And we feel that consumers across the world, especially in the United States, need to be more informed about the consequences, what's happening, and how this will impact the fishery long term. So let's talk about it. So as you can see here, this is a picture of one of many bullets that were spread through this home in an attempt to murder this buyer, still being investigated. We have to realize that this is a cry for help from the fishermen after numerous attempts through starting out years ago protesting, moving to getting physical with fights, moving to burning down boats. Then it escalated to burning down buildings. They're going out on the water and hauling the traps up and cutting them off, polluting the bottom of the ocean with them. And the DFO, who's the fisheries and oceans, the regulators of the water, have their hands tied because of bureaucracy and other means. We got a core fundamental issue in the Canadian regulations, which overall are very good, but this is an issue that will long-term take this fishery down. So Trav, what's going on here? And let's talk about the details and how we can solve this.
Yeah, so I agree. And it's interesting because this was set up as a food fishery hundreds of years ago for the native indigenous communities to provide for their families, whether it was 10 traps or, whatever it takes to just feed your family. And now, since the lobster fishery specifically, but all seafood in Nova Scotia, Canada, it's been very lucrative. So there's been like human interaction, it's abused. So we have to stop this and say, you cannot go out there and ruin the fishery for all of the Nova Scotia communities because of greed that you want to illegally catch lobsters and sell them. If you want to come in the summer months and set your few traps to provide for your family, that's great. That's what the fishery was set up for. But to be honest, it is a fishery that is being abused, and we have to put strict consequences in place for these that are doing it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this started out as treaty rights, and now it's turned into, they're above the law in a sense where they get slaps on the wrist. They go out and do what they want, and there's no consequences for it. And I want to make sure that people that don't understand what's happening in great detail understand it. So we face this as fishermen in Long Island Sound. It's happened all up the northern coast of the United States, and it's huge in Maine right now. The decline in Maine is not by, it's not by just because. It's really happening because of this core factor that when you set traps into the ocean, just imagine that there's traps, they go down to the bottom, they sit there. There's fresh bait in there. The lobsters crawl in there. There's lobsters that are this big that are getting in there and getting their food, and they're getting out through the escape vents. So it's a sustainable fishery. We're feeding the lobsters so they can go repopulate, they can grow. And then as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they become legal harvest size, they get trapped. What's happening is these communities, these native communities, they don't want to go out in December and January and February and do fishing when it's freezing cold. It's rough. It's much rougher. And they're taking traps off the bottom of the ocean and pulling them up 10, 15, 20 fathom, which is the equivalent of 60, 100, 200, 300 feet. The whole time that these traps are moving up through the ocean, there's little baby lobsters falling through the funnels. Now, the reason the seasonality is so important is because in the summertime, the lobsters are soft. They're molting their shells. They're coming to shore. They're mating, and they're in this process of getting their shells to harden up. So in the summer, when you're taking these traps off the bottom of the ocean, the whole time, there are all these little baby lobsters falling through the funnels. And as you can see this picture right here, this is from the DFO. This is a picture illustrating that the lobsters are being gobbled up in droves by all the fish. That's striped bass, that's blackfish, that's tons of fish that are all swimming around the traps being brought up and nailing all the baby lobsters. And that's why the summer fishing is regulated in Canada to end when the water temperature warms up. So the majority of the lobsters being caught in Canada, when the lobsters are falling through the funnels on their way up, they're hard. The spikes on their elbows and their shoulders, they're strong. They're all the parts of the lobster hurts the fish from swallowing it because of these hardened shells. The Maine lobster fishery is no different than Long Island Sound. It's just taking a little bit more time, but they're losing lobsters every single year in mass quantities because they're allowing these fishermen to go out and fish. They're putting all these programs in place, the V-Notch program. We had this in Connecticut too. It didn't save it. It didn't do nothing for it. It's too long. It's gone. So that's the main issue around this native fishing, is that it's not a sustainable practice. And if these guys, these natives that really, like Travis was talking about, are supposed to be going out and fishing as a treaty right to feed their family, not to sell their lobsters for profits. If they want to go out and do that during the commercial lobster season, I don't know why they can't just do that during the commercial lobster season and everybody would get along. We got government officials that really they're not competent enough to understand the core issues, and fishermen are tired of watching these guys go out in their backyards, go out fishing during the summer and rake in millions of pounds of lobsters, and go out every year and have less and less lobsters on the bottom to catch during the time of the year that they're allowed to go catch them. So we're at an end where what is the solution? Where are the solutions going to start to come into play here for this to stop?
You think about penalties and what stops people from doing things further and doing things more, and just like there's consequences to every action that is done illegally, and there's penalties for a year, 2 years, 5 years. People get sentenced to prisons or whatever. This is one of those things in Nova Scotia in general, but in Canada, all throughout the Maritimes, that a fisherman right now, if he's a native indigenous, he goes into court and he's caught with traps out there illegally, and the DFO gets him. He walks into court, they throw the case out. That is something that is a huge problem. It should be any dealer, any fisherman, buyer that is caught with these lobsters red-handed is life in prison. There should be life in prison sentences because it's that serious of an issue that they're killing the fishery for the future of commercial fishermen. So if someone takes away the next 5-10 years of your life, slowly and slowly, he's killing your life. So technically you should take away his life and put him in jail for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds harsh, but at the end of the day, the logic of it makes sense. Like, it's not fair. We've been against this, as I said, since day one. I think another way we can have some solutions to this is the fishermen to start to drive home. Who are you selling to?
Right.
Who are you selling to? Because is that person involved with these summertime native fishing practices? Because that's like the boy who cried wolf. You're going out and saying all these, things about the native fishery, but you're supporting it during the summer. I mean, during your commercial lobster season by selling to a buyer that is supporting the same fishery that you're adamantly against. So that's another, solution that I see is the fishermen need to really pay attention who they're selling to. The other one is the consumers. Like, who are you getting your lobsters from? Whether you're a business, a home chef, or a wholesaler, like, who are you buying your lobsters from? There's too many consumers in the world, really, but especially the United States that we deal with. They're just looking for the cheapest lobsters they can. And that's where you're going to get the native lobsters. That's where you're going to get these main unsustainable fishing practices, fishery lobsters. And that's why we got to drive more information into the consumers to be aware of this issue, so they don't just preach sustainability. They actually act on it. Lobsterboys only buys from commercial licensed Canadian fishermen during the maritime seasons of Canada. We don't buy from Maine for a reason. We don't buy from there, not because we don't want to support the fishermen there. We'd love to support the fishermen there. we're a fisherman family first. That's why we're in this business to support the fishermen. But we can't ethically support the main fishermen knowing that the majority of their lobsters are being caught during just an unsustainable practice during the summer months of the calendar year. So we would be supporting the same death of a fishery that we lost ourselves and we're adamantly against.
And I think that, I mean, just to drive it home, like the transparency we're bringing on a podcast like this is very important for fishermen and consumers because really they connect each other with Lobster Boys. And this is an agenda that is for the future of anybody that wants to consume lobsters, go out and catch lobsters. This is the sustainability for years to come, not just, we can abuse a fishery that's doing well in Nova Scotia right now. This is the sustainability of 5, 10 years down the line to survive this fishery.
Yeah. So this begs the question, who are you supporting? Whether you're a fisherman or you're a consumer, who are you supporting in the purchasing and the selling of your live lobsters? You can follow us here or at Lobster Boys Team on Facebook and Instagram. We encourage you to give us feedback and help us inform everybody on how Lobster Boys is set to inform consumers and help conserve this fishery into the future.
Who are you supporting?